Alright. Hello. I am Chess Comet, and today we're going to do the game Alexei Shirov versus Sergei Rublevsky. This game was played in the year 2000. Montecatini Terme was the city. Shirov had the white pieces, and he started with e4. Sergei Rublevsky played c5. Shirov went knight to f3, e6, d4. C takes on d4, knight takes on d4, a6. And then Shirov played bishop to d3. So this is the Sicilian Khan variation. In the past, Shirov has played knight to c3, and I'm sure many other players, including myself, also play knight to c3. But, bishop to d3 gives the option of c3. Say if you're castling and you don't want to get the knight pinned or whatsoever on this diagonal, c3 is a good option. Anyway, black responded knight to f6. Shirov castled. And Rublevsky played d6, closing the diagonal, which is solid. And notice in the Khan, a lot of white's options were restricted. Often you could run into like the Sozin attack or bishop to e2 and knight c3s. Perhaps this will transpose into something. We'll see. Anyway, Shirov played c4, going for the Moxie-Bind setup. Sergei Rublevsky played bishop to d7. Alexei Shirov played knight to c3, and Rublevsky played knight to c6. And Alexei Shirov finished development with bishop to e3. Another option he could have played is knight takes on c6, bishop takes on c6, followed by b4, queenside majority. And Alexei Kaufman had a great game against Rublevsky in the year 2001. But Shirov goes for development. And in one of Robert James Fisher's games, his early games, in his book, My 60 Memorable Games, these bishops, in a more different position, they were kind of not well placed. I think he didn't like bishop to e3, I think, or maybe, I don't remember if it was bishop to e3, but this is a different position because black didn't play bishop to e7, so it's slightly varied. But anyway, so Rublevsky plays bishop to e7. Another option he could have tried is knight to e5, pressurizing there, great outpost. The thing is, knight e5 also could run into f4 at some point, maybe. It all is what they want. The thing is, you always have to ask yourself, what do you want? I think the loss of the light square bishop, I don't know, the light square bishop is a pretty important piece, I think. So, rightfully so, bishop to e2 is a good move. And then rook to c8, rook to c8, pressurizing e4 indirectly, in c4. Actually, just c4. But, yeah, if there was no c-pawn, then e4 would be indirectly pressured. Because there's a common theme in this to play rook takes on c3. So, I guess a solid move is b3, but b5 is a great answer to that. So anyway, the knight on c3 is welcoming some interesting tactics. So, Shirov played f4 in this game, and Rublevsky castled. And there is a quote in the Sicilian, whenever your opponent can play queen to c5 check, it's better to just not have your king on h1. You cannot, if they can play that, then you have to play your king on h1 often. That is it's a quote I remember from something. So Shirov played king h1, and also is a good principle for if you want to attack, to make sure king safety is very well prioritized. So Rublevsky exchanged a pair of minor pieces with knight takes on d4, and Shirov took back. And then Rublevsky played bishop to c6. Shirov played queen to e2 as a response. So those central squares, most importantly d5, are being fought for, at least on the light squares right now. Okay, so now Rublevsky he played knight to d7. He wants to reroute the knight to a better square. Because the knight on f6 could run into e5 under favorable circumstances, which, knowing Shirov, he would probably play bishop takes on h7, king takes on h7, queen h5 check, and then rook f3 or something like that. I mean, of course, the bishop prevents rook f3, but knowing Shirov, he likes Greek gift sacrifices. But anyway, back to the game. Rook a to d1 was played by Alexei Shirov, and Rublevsky fought back for the center with e5. Shirov played bishop to e3, and Rublevsky played e takes on f4, and Shirov took back with a bishop. And in that exchange, Rublevsky, with his envisioning of knight retreating to d7, has cleared the way for a nice outpost on e5. So he played knight to e5, and for Shirov, this is actually all still preparation. In his preparation, he sort of viewed the moves queen a5 and responding with knight d5, bishop takes on d5, e takes on d5, followed by rook a to e8, and then queen to c2. So, and then h6, of course. So this is a divergence, and Shirov just played chess and played bishop to c2, and Rublevsky played queen to c7. And here, Shirov, he envisioned some kind of weaknesses with a queen and knight on the same diagonal with his bishop on f4, and he wanted to control dark squares, so he came up with this brilliant idea of c5. Now, a more solid move he also would have considered, and is more considering as he solidified his chess as he got older, is bishop to b3 on this diagonal. But c5 is a good move, clearing that diagonal, also for that bishop coming later on b3 if needed. Rublevsky accepts the sacrifice and plays d takes on c5. And Shirov plays knight to d5. And Rublevsky just, he plays queen d6, not fearing any discoveries from the rook at the moment. So, then Shirov, he played bishop to g3, which is a good move. You always want to make sure all your pieces are protected often, because it can run into some great tactics. So, another idea could be knight to b6, taking advantage of that hole on b6. Bishop b5, very sharp. Ooh, and queen takes on b5, a takes on b5, rook takes on d6. Rook takes on d6, bishop takes on d6, and knight takes on a rook takes on a8, rook d1, knight d3, bishop takes on d3, bishop takes on f4, bishop takes on b5, and here the position looks very equal. Opposite color bishops, always favoring the attacker, but also in the endgame, very, very favorable for a draw. So, back to the game. Rublevsky played bishop to b5, thinking, oh, this is great, I just got this f1 rook. Shirov plays queen h5, going for the king, of course, f6, and Shirov played rook to f4, not being afraid of anything with g6, and that is what was played in the game, g6. But in going back, another option Shirov had also is knight takes on f6, winning the queen, but after rook takes on f6 and There's bishop takes on e5. Okay, maybe it's not winning the queen because of mate, of course. It's not winning the queen. But let's see. Bishop takes on... Oh, d6. Or no. e5, okay, yeah. Rook takes f1. And rook takes f1. Queen e6. Queen f5. Queen takes f5. Rook takes f5. Rook d8. Bishop c3. And, of course, this is kind of dangerous, maybe. But, I mean, there is some equality somewhere. An improvement over this line could be rook fe1 also. Just maintaining the position. Back to the game. g6 was played, and Shirov played queen to h6. If he wanted, he could play for a draw with knight takes on f6, queen takes on f6, rook takes on f6, g takes h5, rook takes f8, rook takes f8, of course, bishop takes e5, rook f2, and bishop to b1. So that is probably the objectively best line he could have played for. But when he envisioned this, he didn't see black playing this incredible defensive move, rook a to d8. And he didn't take the rook. I mean, it's tempting. There are a lot of strong variations with that happening, of taking the rook. Shirov went for knight takes f6 here. Another option he could have played is pawn to a4, and after that, bishop c4 follows, followed by knight takes f6, rook takes f6, rook takes d6, rook f takes d6, and rook back to f1. But forcing moves are great, so Rublevsky played rook takes f6, and Shirov played rook takes d6. And so this is a similar but different variation, with a bishop on a different square. And Shirov, of course, plays this brilliant rook to f1. Defending and also giving himself time for making threats. Rublevsky played bishop to f8, and if if rook takes f1, bishop takes e5 is pretty strong. Yeah, it's pretty strong position. And now here, bishop f8 also, I mean, attacking the queen, it looks good, but sadly it's a mistake in this game. g5 is probably a little better in this, attacking the queen this way. Knight to g4 is also an idea. Queen back to c1. Then bishop takes f1. Bishop takes d6. And then another variation, knight to f7 could attack. Queen back to c1. Bishop g5s. And then queen back to e1. That's another option. And after g5, just queen back to... Well, that's pretty much... That's the main sensible move, I think. Queen h5, I think, is okay. But after bishop takes on f1, bishop takes on e5, rook g6, bishop to c3, b5, e5, bishop d3, bishop takes d3, rook takes d3. Black, I think, has a great position here with these pawns coming down. But with queen h3, bishop takes f1, bishop takes e5. The game is very unclear because the black's king is somewhat open too. So there is some great play for both sides. And in this game, so back to the game with bishop to f8, Shirov plays queen back to c1. And now Rublevsky plays bishop takes on f1, and bishop takes on e5 is Shirov's response. And Rublevsky plays another attacking move, which looks good, but sadly it's a blunder. Rook e6. A stronger move could be bishop just back to c4, and then bishop takes d6, rook takes d6. And here it would be very hard to get an endgame, because in general, a rook and bishop versus a queen is very equal to the, like, it's just very hard to grind down, especially if you can defend all targets on the second rank. So play could continue, bishop b3, bishop takes b3, a takes b3. I mean, there's winning chances. There's a lot of winning chances for white too, and you can grind them down. But in the real game, there was more chances given for black, or I mean white. There's more for white. So after queen takes f1, which is played in the game, rook takes e5 is Rublevsky's response, and Shirov played bishop b3 check. c4 was a response. Queen takes c4 is Shirov's move. King to g7, and Shirov picks up a rook at the end. And this concluded the game. Rublevsky resigned. So I thank you very much for watching my videos, and I hope you do well in your prospects. Give me good feedback, and thank you very much. See ya.